It doesn't unfold as you imagine. There won't be one big detonation, no theatrical treachery, no sudden backstabbing or weeping admission. It starts silently, almost elegantly. She will gaze at you with eyes that convince you you've at last discovered tranquility, and for a time you'll believe it. You'll convince yourself you're fortunate. You'll confuse your capitulation with affection. This is how it always commences, not with ruin, but with reverence. She won't ruin you through hatred. She'll ruin you through need, needing your approval, your hours, your focus, your vitality, until you cannot distinguish where she stops and you start. You'll begin reordering your schedule to maintain her composure, modifying your voice so she isn't annoyed, filtering your ideas so she isn't insulted, and bit by bit, your life will contract. You'll quit the gym because she claims it's excessive time apart. You'll cease speaking to your friends because she distrusts them. You'll cease aspiring because she claims you're perpetually unfulfilled. And when you awaken one morning asking where your spirit went, she will inform you, with that soft voice that now sounds like condemnation, you're different. You'll grin because you desire to be the decent man, the tolerant man, the man who gets it. You'll assure yourself it's merely compromise. That's how relationships are formed, yes? Concession. But what you won't grasp until far later is that each concession you offer for her ease is paid for by your fortitude. Each dispute you dodge for her serenity erodes your genuineness. Each instance you hold your tongue to maintain the relationship's stability, a piece of your spirit quiets. Ruin doesn't stem from her words, it stems from what you begin telling yourself. You'll begin to think that being a decent man means being a silent one, that being an affectionate partner means being an obedient one. You'll begin confusing subservience with benevolence. You'll begin believing your life's aim is to prevent her from becoming distressed. And that is when she has you, not because she orchestrated it, but because you permitted it. You'll observe her tone shifting. It'll begin as jests, nuanced, pointed remarks that slice a bit too profoundly. You'll dismiss them with a laugh initially, because that's what a self-assured man does, correct? He isn't bothered by minor things, but you'll observe the jests are invariably at your cost, regarding your work, your routines, your physique, your ambitions. And when you eventually say it troubles you, she'll reply, "I'm just being truthful." That is her method of stating, I can wound you at will, and you'll persist in calling it affection. You'll begin saying sorry for actions you didn't take, for feelings you didn't provoke, for sentiments you cannot comprehend. She'll inform you she's just fatigued, just overwhelmed, just sensitive. And you will agree, as you don't wish to escalate it. You'll believe you are assisting by staying composed, by being tolerant. But she isn't learning tranquility from your tolerance. She's learning dominance from your quiet. Each time you soak up her tempest without repercussions, she becomes more audacious in her turmoil. Soon enough, your connection won't be about affection any longer. It will be about administration. You'll begin administering her temper, her demands, her responses, her self-doubts. You'll turn into an emotional custodian, perpetually tidying up debris you didn't create, treading carefully in your own house. You'll gaze in the mirror and observe a man who was once somebody. You'll recall that fellow, the one who guffawed, who embraced chances, who didn't require authorization to exist. And you'll question where he vanished. You'll glance at her, perched there browsing her phone, exhaling because you failed to see her new haircut or neglected to reply quickly to her text. And you'll grasp the reality. He didn't depart. You interred him. It isn't her statements that accomplish it. It's the gradual erosion of significance that consumes you, one unvoiced letdown at a time. You'll begin observing how each motion you perform, every minor deed of affection, is received with apathy, or even worse, a silent assumption that you were obligated to do it regardless. She will not say, "Thank you." She will say, "At last." You'll repair something, arrange something, resolve something, and rather than appreciation, you'll receive a negative review. You ought to have done it earlier. You might have done it superiorly. And every instance, a part of you collapses inward slightly more. You'll assure yourself it's merely a stage, that she's stressed, that you simply must demonstrate more tolerance. You'll mistake perseverance for power. You'll believe being steadfast makes you honorable, but what you fail to perceive is she isn't examining your tolerance, she's conditioning it. Conditioning you to endure emotional volatility, to accept disrespect as normal, to view affection as toil. She's habituating you to settle for less and label it growth. She'll begin stating things such as, "You're not as warm as you once were," immediately following weeks of disparaging every effort you made to display warmth. She'll say, "You don't make me feel desired," right after she's passed days spurning your contact. And you'll remain there, bewildered, re-examining moments mentally, pondering your error, attempting to locate the concealed formula that will ultimately satisfy her. But that is the contest. You continue guessing, she continues altering the regulations, and at some point on the path, you'll begin to think that perhaps she is correct. Perhaps you genuinely are insufficient. Perhaps you must get better, so you'll exert yourself more. You'll earn more income. You'll purchase finer objects. You'll speak more gently, attend longer, pardon faster. And for a transitory instant, she will recompense you. A grin, a peck, a short instant of heat that feels like sunshine bursting through the overcast. That is the fix you've anticipated. The affirmation that makes everything seem valuable. But it doesn't endure. Because it isn't tranquility. It is dominance. It is conditioning. It is the lure that ensures your return. The most perilous women don't ruin you via strife. They ruin you via bewilderment. They cause you to question your innate intuition. You'll begin filtering yourself within your own thoughts. Prior to speaking, you'll scan an inner list. Will this distress her? Will this cause her to feel uncertain? Will this become a dispute? And the instant you begin posing those queries, you have already been defeated. Because you are not communicating as a man anymore. You are bargaining like a captive. You'll assure yourself it is transient, that it is affection, that relationships require effort. And indeed they do. But not this type of effort. Not the type that exhausts your spirit completely. Not the type that renders you diminished, more silent, less vital. Affection that requires your quiet is not affection. It is reliance. And reliance puts on the facade of closeness. You'll begin longing for yourself in odd manners. You'll long for the noise of your own ideas when isolated in the vehicle. You'll long for how tunes once sounded before you began linking every verse with her temper. You'll long for the feeling of laughing without anxiety that somebody could deem it improper. You'll long for tranquility, the sort that requires no justification. But here is the most awful bit. When you eventually shatter, when the fatigue overtakes you, and you pull back just slightly, cease interacting, cease protecting, cease clarifying, she will observe it. And she will be alarmed. She'll state, "You're different. You're remote. You no longer care." Not because she longs for you, but because she perceives her dominance waning. That is when the weeping starts, the regrets, the vows to improve. And for an instant, you'll trust her. You'll catch sight of the woman you became enamored with, the gentleness, the heat, the care that's been absent for months. And that is the way she retains you. That is the way she restarts the pattern. A bit of benevolence, a bit of optimism, just sufficient to make you overlook that this pleasantness is not a comeback to affection. It is the tether constricting. There arrives an instant, silent, frightening, when you at last perceive it. It does not occur during a dispute or following a major treachery. It occurs on a regular day. Perhaps you're waiting in traffic, gazing from the window. Perhaps you're cleaning the plates while she's on her device in the adjacent room. And for the initial time, you view your existence for what it has become, a bargaining for serenity with a person who doesn't truly desire serenity, You'll observe it in your physique first, the constriction in your torso when you detect her tread, the abrupt tightness in your jaw when your device illuminates with her name, the manner your brain begins readying justifications before you've even acted incorrectly. That isn't affection. That is heightened alertness. That is your neurological system cautioning you that you have been residing in a minor conflict area masked as a partnership. You'll begin remembering instances that were illogical then, but are clear now. The instance she bantered just a bit excessively with that colleague and labeled you insecure for observing. The instance she erupted over something minor, and by its conclusion, you were the one offering apologies. The manner every problem somehow contorted back to your alleged shortcomings until you began thinking you were the shared factor in all her misery. It's akin to stirring from a lengthy slumber, just to grasp you've been the one hemorrhaging all along. And when you do eventually attempt to discuss it, when you muster the bravery to state something seems amiss, she will reverse the narrative quicker than you can complete the statement. She'll claim you're exaggerating, that you're excessively emotional, that you're inventing things. She'll inform you that all pairs argue, that all partnerships are difficult, that this is standard. And since you've misplaced your point of comparison for what standard is, you'll question yourself once more. That is how profoundly the harm penetrates. You see, ruin doesn't only seize your tranquility, it seizes your viewpoint. You cease relying on your own assessment. You begin requiring her to inform you what is genuine. If she calls you self-centered, you accept it. If she calls you distant, you absorb it. If she calls you the issue, you begin attempting to mend yourself for her sake. You give her the keys to your very self and label it concession. But here is the contradiction. The more you mend yourself to satisfy her, the less she esteems you. Because in her view, a man who yields that readily isn't a man. He's an asset. Something to be administered, used up, depleted. She cannot look up to what she manipulates, and yet she cannot cease manipulating what she doesn't look up to. That is the infernal cycle. She prods to check your breaking point, and when you yield, she scorns you for it. Then she laments that you aren't tough enough, not bold enough, not manly enough, totally omitting that she has passed years penalizing every show of fortitude you ever demonstrated. You'll observe how she begins altering the past. Abruptly, the qualities she previously appreciated in you, your autonomy, your drive, your self-assurance, are now the exact things she disparages. You're excessively focused on your job. You're sentimentally detached. You believe you're superior to all. It isn't that you are different. It's that she has finished feeling proud of your fortitude. Now she begrudges it. Because fortitude reminds her she cannot completely possess you. And when you attempt to retrieve it, when you at last refuse something or hold your position, observe her eyes. They will change. Stunned initially, then wounded, then enraged. Because that is when she grasps the enchantment might be dissolving. She will label you remote, haughty, unfeeling. She'll charge you with deserting her sentimentally, and you will sense that ancient, recognizable guilt ascending in your throat, that impulse to mend, to clarify, to pacify her. But if you yield here, if you return to glossing it over, you will forfeit yourself permanently. The reality is, most men don't depart because they've ceased loving her. They depart because they cannot identify themselves any longer, because they've turned into aliens in their own existence, because they've bartered meaning for serenity and received neither. That is what she ruins. Not your existence, but your desire to live it. The day you begin withdrawing, even marginally, will be the day she detects it. You will not need to declare anything. She will perceive it before you do. It will be in your voice, in the manner you no longer hurry to justify yourself, in the silent remoteness that arrives when a man at last understands too much. You'll cease pursuing her tempers. You'll cease offering to mend what she shatters. You'll cease handling every exhale, every quiet, every glance of displeasure as a call to conflict. You'll begin conserving your vitality, and that to her will seem like treachery. She will attempt to lure you back, not with affection, with culpability. She will recall to you all she has performed for you. She will state you've altered, that you aren't the man she became enamored with. And she will be correct, but not in the manner she imagines. Because the man she fell for was never genuine. He was an iteration of you acting for validation. The actual man, the one who has been choking beneath levels of placation and fatigue, is at last stirring. Initially, you will feel heartless for withdrawing. You will feel like a rogue for selecting serenity over companionship. But that is the falsehood you have been inhabiting. That safeguarding your mental health makes you self-centered. That refusing means you've ceased loving her. That limits are somehow treachery. She has conditioned you to view self-esteem as hostility, remoteness as penalty, disengagement as disregard. But what she labels indifference is just lucidity. You'll begin observing the manipulative tactics for what they are. The weeping that once neutralized you now seems practiced. The abrupt heat following a dispute feels like a maneuver. The regrets sound like capital, each one purchasing her additional time to continue the contest. You'll grasp she never desired recovery. She desired dominance. And as soon as you perceive that, something unchangeable occurs. The mirage shatters. There is a silent instant, a personal insurrection, when you cease responding. She shouts, and you do not wince. She charges, and you do not clarify. She weeps, and you do not hurry in with solace. You simply remain there, motionless, calm, steadfast. And in that quiet, she encounters something she has not witnessed in ages. Your fortitude. Not the theatrical sort that moves crates or settles debts. The sort that declares, I no longer require your authorization to be. That is when the interplay shifts. She will either intensify or withdraw. Some women increase their efforts. They will press harder, weep louder, menace you with departure, offend you in manners that slice directly to the marrow, because if she cannot manage you with warmth, she will attempt to manage you with dread. She will try to make you fearful of her absence. But when you are no longer fearful, when you have already conceded that departing is preferable to treading carefully, she forfeits her dominance. You'll begin observing how much quiet once terrified you, how uneasy you were with solitude, with being misinterpreted, with being perceived as the villain. But that dread recedes, because serenity, once you sample it again, is compelling. You'll begin desiring the ease of your own presence, the lucidity of not needing to vet every idea, the liberty of inhaling without condemnation, and that is when you will grasp something deep. She did not ruin you. You were ruining yourself by handing her the instruments and labeling it affection. The man you were, the one who existed to satisfy, to clarify, to merit love, he will perish silently. And in his stead will be a man who doesn't plead to be noticed, who doesn't pursue affirmation, who doesn't confuse turmoil with attachment. A man who has no need to overpower, but also declines to bow. That is the type of man no woman can ruin, not because he is unfeeling, but because he is complete. Liberty does not appear like pyrotechnics. It arrives like dawn, silent, incremental, nearly unobserved until the brightness floods the space. One morning you'll awaken and grasp the strain is absent. The atmosphere seems lighter. The quiet, which previously felt oppressive and antagonistic, now feels like serenity. You will sip your coffee more slowly. You will sit for longer. You will recall what it is like to be without preparing for a collision. You'll begin observing the minor things once more. How the dawn's light strikes the table. How melodies sound when they aren't vying with critique. How mirth feels when it isn't a protective device. That is when it strikes you. You were not incapable of being loved. You were simply not free. You were not shattered. You were tethered. What she ruined was not your ability to love. It was your fantasy that affection meant bondage. The ruin was an instructor. It dismantled you, ripped away the veneers of validation-seeking and acting, until nothing remained but the reality. You were never intended to be another's sentimental support structure. You were intended to stand independently. You were intended to select serenity over validation, reality over endurance, esteem over infatuation. You were intended to be a man who does not require saving and who does not confuse turmoil with fervor. When you cease being fearful of her absence, you start to recover yourself. And when you recover yourself, the type of woman who could ruin you forfeits entry permanently. Because she is unaware of how to handle a man who refuses to bow. She cannot lure him with culpability, cannot domesticate him with compliments, cannot shatter him with quiet. He has peeked behind the drape. He is aware of what affection is not, and that is when you comprehend the grandest reality of all. She never possessed the ability to ruin you. She only possessed the ability you granted her. Each exhale, each guilt-inducing tactic, every ploy. It all depended on your involvement. The contest concludes the instant you cease participating. You will bear wounds, yes. The sort only men who have loved too profoundly and forfeited themselves too entirely ever bear. But they will solidify into insight. You will move differently, communicate differently. You will heed your inner voice again. You'll rely on your instinct when it murmurs that serenity should never feel like treading carefully. And perhaps one day you will encounter someone new, someone who doesn't confuse your composure with indifference, someone who doesn't examine your tolerance merely to feel dominant, someone who views your fortitude not as a menace, but as security. And you will love her in a different way, not with hopelessness, not with dread, but with silent self-assurance. Because you will understand now, genuine affection doesn't require you to contract. It beckons you to grow. But even if you never encounter her, even if your tale concludes with only you and your serenity, that remains a triumph. Because you escaped. You confronted the ruin, trod through the remnants, and constructed something holy on the far side. Yourself. And that is what each man must ultimately grasp. That the woman who ruined him was never his foe. She was his reflection. She revealed to him precisely where he was vulnerable, precisely what he endured, precisely what he needed to recover. And in that act, she compelled him to develop into the type of man nobody can ever ruin again. So if you are hearing this, and you are positioned in that instant of insight, the junction between remaining shattered or moving freely, recall this. Serenity is not located in her pardon. It is located in your rejection of continually betraying your own self. Select yourself this time, not from resentment, but from insight, out of affection, out of preservation. Because the reality is straightforward, brother. The woman who ruined you only completes the task if you permit her. There is a quiet that follows the tempest, a quiet so deep it nearly feels alien. You have passed years enveloped in clamor, charges, demands, the ceaseless drone of sentimental strain. When it vanishes, your brain is unsure how to handle the stillness. Initially, it feels vacant. Then gradually, it begins to feel holy. Because under that quiet, something is developing. Something you believed was gone permanently. Your self-esteem. You begin to grasp how dominant you have always been, just misguided. You channeled that dominance into demonstrating your value to someone who was never able to perceive it. You squandered it, attempting to construct serenity in a home that flourished on turmoil. You offered your vitality to someone who confused your benevolence with vulnerability. But here is the turn. You were never vulnerable. You were faithful. You were dedicated. You were propelled by affection, even as it was slaying you. That is not vulnerability. That is proof of how much spirit you genuinely possess. Society enjoys disgracing men for departing. They label it desertion. They label it self-centeredness. They label it timidity. But they fail to comprehend that remaining in a partnership that ruins you is not affection. It is gradual self-destruction. Departing is not timidity. It is revival. It is a man at last recalling that serenity is not an indulgence. It is an entitlement. One day you will stand before the mirror and identify yourself again. Not the man who existed to maintain another's composure, but the man who discovered how to keep himself balanced. You will perceive in your gaze a silent fortitude that was absent previously. It isn't rage. It isn't resentment. It is something purer, something keener. The steadfast tranquility that arrives when you no longer require being understood to feel complete. You will cease clarifying why you departed. You will cease regretting selecting yourself. You will cease protecting your limits as though they demand validation. And that is when you will begin living. Not merely being, not enduring, but genuinely living. The sort of existence that feels like liberty in each inhalation. And perhaps, just perhaps, you'll begin to perceive the present concealed within all that suffering. Because ruin, when endured, turns into metamorphosis. Each wound becomes a lesson. Each sorrow becomes protection. Every ploy you tolerated becomes a chart guiding back to your own self. She did not ruin you. She shaped you. She compelled you to face the pieces of you that yet required affirmation. The pieces that were frantic to be selected. Now, you comprehend. You were intended to select yourself. The men who ascend from this type of ruin are different. They do not speak loudly. They do not pursue vengeance. They move with silent command because they have witnessed what forfeiting yourself appears like. And they will never return there again. They are composed because they have endured turmoil. They are modest because they have been shattered. They are steadfast because they know serenity is valuable enough to safeguard, even if it requires standing in solitude. So here is the reality, brother. Your woman may have ruined who you were, but in that act, she unveiled who you were intended to become. Do not squander that instruction. Do not condemn the blaze that incinerated your fantasies. Because on the far side of ruin stands the iteration of you that cannot be swayed, cannot be shamed, cannot be managed. The man who no longer mistakes being required with being cherished. That man, you, was not constructed to exist on his knees. He was constructed to stand erect, to safeguard his serenity like it is holy land, to guide his existence without authorization, and to love without forfeiting himself in the act. So if you are hearing this and you remain in that pattern, still attempting to merit the warmth that ought to have been offered freely, this is your instant. Depart. Recover your breath. Recover your spine. Recover your life. Because serenity isn't something you locate in her validation. It is something you construct in your own quiet. If this communication resonated with you, pass it to someone who needs to hear it. Like the video, join the channel, and endorse the link below. You are not shattered. You are reconstructing. And when you are finished, nobody will ever be capable of ruining you again.